Today's story begins with a mystery rising out of the desert, silent, sudden, and impossible to ignore. A woman no one expected appears on the edge of a lonely cowboy's land. Danger follows her like a shadow, destiny burns in her eyes, and every step she takes carries the weight of a promise made years ago. She walks right up to the man who once saved her life, looks him in the eyes, and speaks the one sentence that will turn his entire world upside down. "Remember me, Cowboy. I'm the Apache girl you saved years ago, and I've come back to marry you." Subscribe, share, and comment. Let's start this video. The morning sun had barely stretched across the rugged hills when the stillness of the frontier settled over the land like a thick blanket. My ranch stood quiet, almost too quiet for a place used to coyotes yelping and cattle stirring before dawn. The air smelled of dust and sage, a scent I'd grown used to over the years living alone out here. Solitude had become second nature, a kind of companion that didn't speak but lingered close. I stepped out onto the porch, wiping sleep from my eyes as I scanned the horizon. I wasn't expecting company, not today, not any day, and yet something in the wind felt different. I saddled Bluebird with practiced ease, tightening the cinch and brushing the dust off her flank. She was restless this morning, shifting her weight as if she'd sensed something long before I had. Her ears flicked forward, tail swishing with impatience. Animals notice things we miss, danger, strangers, the shift of the earth beneath our feet. I tried to shake off the unease settling in my gut. Maybe a coyote had wandered too close, or maybe a Mustang herd was kicking up dust nearby. But the feeling clung to me as I mounted up and headed toward the fence line. The land stretched far and wide, a mix of rolling grass, stubborn shrubs, and rocky outcroppings. Riding through it always gave me time to think. Most days I preferred the silence. Out here, a man's voice didn't matter much unless he was warning someone or telling them goodbye. I lived simple, worked hard, and kept mostly to myself. Folks in town said I was reliable, quiet, a man who knew trouble but didn't go looking for it anymore. They weren't wrong. Trouble and I had been friends once, but we'd grown apart, or so I thought. Bluebird froze suddenly, her muscles tightening beneath me. She sniffed the air and stamped her hoof, letting out a low rumble. My hand went instinctively to the rifle slung by the saddle. I scanned the brush, watching for movement. The desert didn't play tricks. If something was there, it meant to be. The bushes rustled softly, far too controlled to be a wandering animal. My breath slowed as I prepared for whatever stepped out next. Bandits, a drifter, someone hunting on my land. My mind cycled through the possibilities, none of them good. Then she appeared. A woman stepped out from the shadows of the canyon trail, as if the land had parted to let her through. She moved with a calm, fluid confidence, her deerskin dress lightly brushing against her legs with each step. Her long black hair was braided, adorned with beads that shimmered faintly in the early light. She held no weapon, no pack, no sign of fear, but her presence alone was enough to set every instinct in me on edge. Not danger, something else, something I couldn't name. She approached slowly, stopping just a few feet away. "Mason Callahan," she said, her voice steady as running water. "Do you remember me?" I stared at her, trying to place her face, her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture. She spoke my name like she'd been carrying it for miles, but I shook my head. "Can't say I do, should I?" Her lips curved into a small smile, not mocking, not disappointed, but patient, as if she had expected the answer. "Years ago, by Redstone Ridge, you saved a young girl from the river." The memory hit me like a sudden gust of wind, stirring old images from a part of my mind I rarely visited anymore. I remembered the storm, the roaring flood, the panic of hearing a child's scream echo off the canyon walls. I jumped into that river without hesitation, grabbing the small, terrified girl before the current swallowed her whole. I carried her back to the Apache camp, half drowned myself, and the elders had thanked me with food and shelter for the night. By morning I was gone. I'd never known the girl's name, never expected to see her again. "You were that girl?" I asked, disbelief settling heavy on my tongue. She nodded once, her expression softening. "My name is Nasha." "Well, Nasha, I'm glad to see you safe after all these years. But what brings you out here?" I asked, confusion running circles in my mind. Her eyes held mine, steady and unwavering. "I have traveled far to find you, many winters, many nights guided by dreams. I've come because our fates were tied that day in the river. I've come to marry you, Mason Callahan." The words hit me harder than the memory. Bluebird snorted sharply, almost offended on my behalf. I nearly dropped my rifle. "Marry me? We barely exchanged 2 breaths that day." Nasha stepped closer, her tone gentle but unshakably certain. You saved my life. Among my people, such an act creates a bond that does not fade. My grandmother said the spirits tied my path to yours. For many seasons, I have seen your face in my dreams. I am here because it is time to honor that destiny. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Destiny, marriage me, it felt impossible, absurd even, and yet. Something about her felt familiar, in a way that went deeper than memory. Before I could find the right words, she glanced over her shoulder, tension flickering briefly across her features. Someone has followed me, she whispered. My pulse kicked up. Followed? By who? She shook her head. Men who do not understand our ways. Men who believe I carry something valuable. Men who want what I will not give. Her voice trembled for the first time, and suddenly the calm morning didn't feel calm anymore. Footsteps echoed faintly in the distance, multiple riders heading our way. Nasha met my eyes again, urgency replacing the quiet certainty. Mason, your life and mine are woven together now, and whether you believe in destiny or not, danger is coming for both of us. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper heavy with truth. If you turn me away now, they will kill me, and if you shelter me, everything you know will change. The distant thunder of approaching horses grew louder, spreading across the canyon like a warning drum. I tightened my grip on the reins, heart pounding, breath thick with dust and adrenaline. I didn't know this woman, yet somehow I already knew I couldn't let anything happen to her. Not again, not ever. But protecting her meant stepping into a fight I didn't understand. A fight that might swallow my quiet life whole. The riders were getting closer. And in that moment, one thing was clear. This wasn't fate passing by. It was fate knocking. And I had only seconds left to decide whether to open the door. The thunder of hooves grew louder, rolling through the canyon like a storm on open prairie. Dust lifted in thin spirals as the riders closed in, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun. I could make out 4 men, armed fast, and not the kind who came for polite conversation. Nasha stayed close, her calm returning like a veil she pulled over her fear. She didn't cling, didn't tremble, but she watched the riders with the still focus of someone who'd been hunted before. I swung myself into the saddle and reached down, offering her my hand. She hesitated only a heartbeat before placing her hand in mine and climbing up behind me. Hold tight, I told her. She didn't answer with words, just slid her arms around my waist, steady and ready. Bluebird sensed the urgency and lunged forward the second I clicked my tongue, taking off across the brush. The riders spotted us instantly, shouts erupting behind. The chase had begun. Rocks scattered beneath Bluebird's hooves as we darted between low shrubs and uneven ground. Bullets cracked through the air, sharp and fast. Nasha ducked instinctively, her grip tightening around me. Easy, I muttered to the horse as much as to myself. We needed higher ground, or at least a place where 4 men on horseback couldn't surround us in seconds. The ridge ahead rose like a jagged spine. If we could get up there, we'd have the advantage. But the men were closing in, spurred on by greed or anger or whatever reason made grown men chase a lone woman across the frontier. Bluebird climbed fast, muscles coiling and stretching under us. Another bullet whizzed past, ricocheting off a rock so close it peppered my sleeve with grit. I cursed under my breath, tightened my hold on the reins, and pushed forward. When we reached the ridge's shoulder, I slid off the saddle and pulled Nasha down with me, gesturing toward a narrow crevice between 2 boulders. Stay low, don't move till I say. She obeyed without question. I crouched beside the rock, rifle raised, breath steadying as the first rider appeared on the slope. He was cocky, leaning forward in the saddle like a man who had never doubted his luck. I fired once. He toppled sideways, hitting the ground with a dull thud. The other 3 froze, their horses rearing. That gave me the time I needed. Bluebird circled uphill in confusion, but she'd stay safe. I fired again, missed, but close enough to make them scatter for cover. The canyon echoed with gunfire as they traded shots with me, their bullets pinging against stone. Nasha stayed hidden, quiet as shadow. This ends today, a voice yelled from below. Hand over the girl and we ride away clean. Not happening, I called back. If they thought I'd hand over a woman who had barely finished explaining why her life was in danger, they'd misjudged me more than most. The leader tried another approach. You don't know what she's carrying. She's worth more than your land, more than your life, more than his words cut off as I shot the rock beside his head, sending a shower of shards into his face. I'd had enough talking. The men regrouped, trying to flank me from both sides, but the ridge wasn't forgiving terrain. They needed space to maneuver. I needed only a clear shot. One more fell when he tried to rush forward. The others retreated behind a fallen log, anger rising in their shouts. They weren't used to being resisted. Good. Let frustration shake their aim. I looked at Nasha. Her face was calm, but her eyes held something deeper, a mix of grief, fear, and determination. Who are they? I whispered. Her voice barely reached me over the wind. Treasure hunters. Men who believe I know where a sacred artifact is hidden. They followed me for weeks. My people would not give it to them, so they tried to take me instead. You don't have it, I asked. She shook her head. No, it was never mine to take, but they won't believe that. I exhaled slowly. I'd stepped into something far bigger than a promise or a spiritual bond. This was blood money, the kind that drove men mad, and they weren't leaving without a fight. The last two men tried pushing up the slope again, splitting apart to come at me from both sides. Bold, stupid, predictable. I took a deep breath, dropped into a crouch and fired left, hit the first square in the shoulder. He tumbled down screaming. I spun right, firing again just as the second raised his pistol. My bullet struck first. Silence followed, not peaceful silence, heavy-weighted, the kind that settles after danger dies but leaves its echo. Nasha slowly stepped out from the crevice, her expression unreadable as she looked at the bodies below. I holstered my rifle, wiped the sweat from my brow and walked toward her. You all right? She nodded, though her voice wavered. I am alive because of you. Again, she met my gaze and something in her eyes shifted, recognition, trust, something deeper than simple gratitude. That ridge felt too exposed now. We needed to get back to the ranch, rest, regroup, figure out what came next. When we reached the cabin, the stillness that greeted us felt different from the morning's quiet. This time it felt like the world holding its breath. Nasha explored the place with slow steps, her fingertips brushing the wood grain of the table, the iron kettle, the windowsill. Everything here is peaceful, she murmured. This is a good home, I shrugged. Simple, keeps me alive. Keeps me busy. She turned toward me then, a seriousness settling over her features. Mason, I meant what I said earlier. My people believe our lives were woven together the moment you saved me. I've followed dreams for years, dreams that always led me back to you. She stepped closer, her voice steady despite the storm she'd endured. I came to offer you my hand, not because of tradition alone, but because I chose this path, because I believe my place is here, with you. Her words settled like warmth in a cold room, unexpected yet not unwelcome. I looked at her, not the girl I'd saved, but the woman she'd become. Strong, brave, steadfast, the kind of woman who crossed desert and danger for a promise she believed in. Nasha, you barely know me, I said softly. She shook her head. I know your spirit. It saved me once. And today it saved me again. I trust it. I trust you. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked outside, letting the evening wind cool my thoughts. The horizon glowed with fading gold, casting long shadows across the land. I'd lived alone because it was easier than letting the past catch up. But maybe life wasn't meant to be lived in quiet corners. Maybe fate hadn't knocked that morning, it had kicked the damn door in. When I returned inside, Nasha waited, eyes steady. I took a slow breath. If you choose to stay, I won't turn you away. Whatever comes next, we face it together. A small, relieved smile touched her lips. Then our paths are one from this day. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and new beginnings. And somewhere in the vast stretch of the frontier, fate, at last, felt settled.